students, welcome to the final lecture of the Unit 5 of Ergonomics. So here in this presentation, we'll be mainly talking about your major project and we'll be covering some of the issues which you are facing while executing your major project. So our design brief was to design a conceptual personal assistant for the elderly. Okay, so we are basically designing it for the people aged over 60 years, and we are designing in a fashion which considers their mental and physical limitations and capabilities. Okay, while they are using the product. So you all have started your work in this with this brief, and here we'll be in this presentation we'll be basically giving you some general feedback and some of the quick tips to address some of the doubts you raised during the previous presentations which were conducted online. So most of you have already done this. The concept generation, it has to be attempted at three levels. So the first level is the physical form level. Then we have the ideation at interaction level, and also at aesthetic and communication levels. Okay, so these are the three levels which we have already discussed, and many of you have, I mean, most of you have already attempted this. And so physical form level, if you I mean, going into the details at each and every level how the concept generation can be done. So for example, in physical form level, the concepts can be anything, like it can be in any variable which can be in form of a pendant or a wrist worn thing or a ring, uh, or it can be any accessory or attached to your apparel, or any other devices of personal of day-to-day use, or it can be any handheld device, or it can be a tabletop device, or it can be a device which is integrated with the furniture, etc., etc. And so the most important thing is that whatever you ideate, you should sketch out each of these ideas on paper, and that has to be in sync with your project brief. Okay, and then at the interaction level, if we see the concept generation, uh, so the first thing comes is to first fix the functions, right? So what does fixing the function means? It means that what are all the tasks which the user can do using the device. For example, uh, can there be functions of medicine reminder, or some body vitals monitoring, like some pulse rate is continuously monitored, or things like that? Or is it going to have functions like calling, messaging, or image sharing, and things like that? Or should it have emergency or SOS functions, or any specific recreation functions specific only to the elderly? Okay, so you have to fix the functions, or the set of functions based on the research which you have conducted. Okay, so you have already done your primary research, where you sort of shadowed or interviewed some persons, and you figured out what are the functions people require assistance with. So maybe you can sort of list out those functions, you know and secondly, think about what are the modes through which information will be fed in and received from the device. So basically, these are the what are the input and output modalities involved. So will there be a touch-based screen for giving the input, or will there be physical buttons in a device to sort of activate any function, or will there be voice recognition, or hand-based, or facial gesture, or any kind of gestural input? Or how will the output be will the output be through the haptic feedback? Will the output be through, again, through uh, screen based feedback? So things like that. Or is it going to be audio feedback also? Also, what is the combination of input and output you would be sort of looking at? Okay, so you have to sort of ideate on this level. So this is as far as the interaction level is concerned. Then we come to the aesthetic and communication level. So here ideation would mean that you are basically thinking about color or material and finish of the physical form. So you should think about what is the appropriate palette for the elderly, right? In case of, and also in case of some details like physical buttons on the device and things like that. So how will they look? So you have to sort of fix on what is the appropriate color palette for the product body. Okay, and also you should also think about what are the appropriate color palettes, font type and size, icon type and size, if there is any screen based interface involved. Okay. Okay, so these are the like some of the initial ideation and concept generation. I guess you all have done, all the groups have most probably done it. And moving on, now is the main challenge, which is to do with finalizing your concept. Okay, so so the first thing is to finalize the physical form. So the criteria is to see, I mean, out of all the forms that you have ideated, see what is the form that the elderly person would be most comfortable with, either physically or psychologically, right? So maybe the elderly person is not very much comfortable with a glove-like thing, okay, a wearable which is like a glove. Maybe he or she is uncomfortable with it. So we should chuck that idea. Maybe we had that idea during the ideation phase. Now we have to sort of choose one of the physical form based on the criteria that what is the most comfortable for the elderly person, right? And then we have to sort of finalize the functions, right? Uh, uh, all these can be done parallelly. So on one hand, you will be doing finalizing the physical form, and then the finalize the functions. So already we have discussed that based on your primary and secondary research data, you should choose the set of the functions that the user would be able to do with the device, and also parallelly you should finalize the input and output modalities. So you should be choosing what is the most appropriate mode of input or output. Okay, and this should be based on the cognitive abilities and the mental model of the user. Okay, so now once you have sort of finalized each of these domains, you should take insights from this and develop the product form. So here, uh, while developing the product form, you should think about first thing is to see how all the functions will be executed through the selected input and output modalities. Okay, so you have this set of functions right here. So the set of functions which you have finalized, and once when you check that are all the functions will be well executed through the input and output modalities which you have chosen. So based on it, you have to sort of you may need a bit of tweaking in the input and output modes. Okay. So for example, maybe you have thought of initially that let's choose only physical buttons for input modality, right? And but there are some functions like some there can be some recreation function, a specific type of recreation which you have chosen, right? And that might be quite impossible to be sort of executed through only physical buttons in the device, right? So once you have sort of finalized the functions, you have to sort of also tweak the input and output modalities. And once the input and output modalities are sort of are finalized, so you have to sort of see how well they go with the chosen form, right? So it means that so either you need to sort of detail out your form more, or you may need to sort of tweak a bit your form in order to fit the all the input and output modalities which you have thought of. For example, if uh, the form is an elliptical pendant which you have finalized, and the input mode is a touch screen, right? The screen need not be a rectangular one, right? So Obviously the screen can follow uh, sort of the elliptical form, and based on it, so you have to sort of develop the visuals. Okay, so based on the final form and the input output modes chosen, uh, and also the visual themes which you have highlighted during the ideation phase, you should finalize on the visual part of the user interface, and also finalize the visual of the product form. And once this is finalized, the product is finalized, and based on the product and the chosen visual themes, you should sketch out the concept packaging for the same. So, coming to the concluding remarks, so let's look at few points. So, the final form representation can be through CAD renders, or it can be through high fidelity hand sketches. So, if you are doing by hand, make sure that it is well done. Uh, you can even do renders through your hand, or it can be digital sketches done in uh, through Photoshop, done on your iPad or anything like that. Okay, and interaction representation can be done through, one of the mode can be detailing out the content and the visuals of the screen. Okay, if for a screen based interactions, or if you are having, say, some sort of a conversation, that is voice and audio based input output modalities. In that case, you can have some uh, text representing the conversation or mimicking the conversation between the user and the device, or it can be storyboard snippets if there are, say, some gesture based interactions for input, and storyboarding can be followed for any other of this above cases also, right? That is one of the most widely used modes for you know uh, for any of the interaction scenarios. And visual intervention should be reflected in form of the final form representation, and also through screen based user interfaces and final packaging can also be visually represented, and you don't need to sort of actually make the final packaging. So this is done because you might not be having access to materials for making the actual packaging, so you can just even sketch it out how the final packaging will look like, or if you want, you can even sort of model it and overlay the graphics on it, or you can even sketch it through hand. And the physical mockup or any type of prototyping on a physical level is not required. Only visuals will suffice. And suppose if you have sort of attempted, it is fine if you have, say, if you had, say, some materials in your stock, you might have attempted. If you have attempted a physical mockup, it is fine and you can put it in your documentation, but it is not mandatory because obviously uh, you don't have access to the materials now. Okay, so only the visuals are required. Okay, and yeah, so let's look at your final submissions then, having the final concepts. And in case of any queries, please do reach out to me as well as DT sir.